Welcome to Run SDJ. Today I'm going to be doing my full review of the Amazfit Helio Strap, having used the device for the last 20 days. If you are looking for a review that directly compares this to the Whoop band, you may want to look elsewhere because I don't own a Whoop. But I will be comparing the data to my daily wearable within the Garmin ecosystem, which is an Epix Pro Gen 2 sports watch, which feeds into the Garmin Connect app. I'll also be comparing its performance as an activity heart rate monitor to the Polar Verity Sense bicep-based heart rate monitor, which came out top in my testing last year of heart rate monitors against devices from both Garmin and Apple. So let's get to it. Firstly, what is the Helio Strap from Amazfit? Well, basically it's a subscription-free 24/7 wearable wrist-based heart and activity tracking band with no screens and no buttons. It is a health monitoring device giving insight into heart rate variability, sleep, blood oxygen levels, stress, exertion, and fitness level. It will also give you what Amazfit called biocharge energy monitoring, which is basically a score of your energy levels throughout the day, similar to Garmin's body battery or Whoop's recovery score. All of these metrics are synced with the Zepp app, which is Amazfit's parent company's health app, similar to Garmin Connect or Apple Fitness and other health apps. This device costs £100 in the UK, $100 in the US, and €100 in Europe. And once you buy the device, you have access to the Zepp app ecosystem without any ongoing subscription. In the box, you get the device, which is made from a fiber reinforced polymer, already connected to a 22mm nylon, slightly stretchy wrist strap, a charging puck, but no charging cable, a small manual, and that is it. The device has a BioTracker 6.0 ppg biometric sensor, which you'll also find in the mid-range Amazfit Active 2 and the higher-end Balance 2 activity watch. It also has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a temperature sensor. It also has a vibration motor, which is used to alert you to things like low battery, and also allows you to set a vibrating alarm via the Zepp app, though this is not a smart alarm which wakes you when it thinks you are well rested. You have to set the time like on a traditional alarm. Where it has drawn direct comparison to the Whoop is that the device has no buttons or screen. The earlier mentioned Zepp app is the place where you would view your daily metrics and you would start an activity such as running, cycling, strength training, and it even has a dedicated Hyrox mode, unless you also own an Amazfit watch to start your activities. Setting up and putting on the device was easy enough, but for more detail on that part, go back and watch my first impressions video. I won't repeat all that here. Worn on the wrist, the device is comfortable enough. I wouldn't mind a little bit more stretch in the strap, but I'm glad it is a fabric-based and not a silicone-based one. The only time I have removed it is in the shower, like with my Garmin, but aside from that and when it needs charging, it's always on. The claimed battery life is about 10 days, and I have found that to be true. It's now been through 2 full battery cycles, lasting 10.5 days each time. Recharging the device from empty to full has taken about 100 minutes each time. So how does the Helio band perform? Firstly, I'll talk through some of the key daily metrics I've been comparing to my Garmin. I'm not going to go through them all because there are too many, but I'll bring up the features that are listed on the Amazfit website. Now, it's worth saying at this point that each ecosystem has its own way of calculating some of their scored metrics, so I wouldn't expect the Zepp app's biocharge to follow exactly the same score as the Garmin body battery equivalent, but I would hope to see some trends across the data. So I'll start with exactly that, the Zepp's Wake biocharge versus the Garmin's Wake body battery. These both take into account things like exertion combined with how good a night's sleep you've got to give you a score. On this chart, on the whole, you can kind of see that while Garmin generally gives me a higher Wake body battery score, when the Garmin score increases, the same is true of the Zepp app's biocharge score, albeit by a different and often more conservative amount. There are some more pronounced peaks and troughs on the Garmin data, getting as high as a perfect 100 score, whereas I think my highest Zepp biocharge score was an 85. A couple of interesting observations though. On the evening of the 26th of June, I ran a max out 10k race, so the next morning I would typically expect my battery or charge score to be quite low. This was true of the Garmin score being about a 48, but strangely my ZEP charge rose the following morning compared to the previous day. The following week, on the 3rd of July, I ran a max out 5k race in the evening. This time, my Garmin score only took a minor dip the following morning, while my ZEP's biocharge score took a more pronounced dip. So all in all, for the body battery stroke biocharge score, I think the Helio Strap is fine, but the results here were not exactly conclusive. Another method where each ecosystem will have its own method of scoring is stress. This time, my ZEP stress score was consistently higher than the Garmin stress score, but there was a few trends of rise and fall between the two devices. ZEP rates anything below 40 as relaxed, and Garmin anything lower than 50 as being low stress, so they are both consistent in having me as relaxed and low stress during the testing period. The rest of the stats I'm going to look at should be more directly comparable between the two devices. Looking at sleep, it's pleasing to see that both the Garmin and the Amazfit Helio Strap are pretty closely aligned on sleep duration most days, with only 3 out of the 20 days where we can see a difference of around an hour or more. Looking at the bedtime and wake time data, the ZEP app has me correctly having an earlier night than the Garmin on the 22nd of June, as I had an early 4:15 AM start the next day to take my wife to a triathlon. On the 6th of July, I recall waking up to feed my cat, but as it was a Sunday, I went back to bed for further sleep of over an hour. The Amazfit data was accurate in taking this into account, but the Garmin data had me as woken up when I fed the cat and didn't even register me going back to bed in the sleep duration or as a nap. With regards to heart rate variability, both devices were pretty much aligned to the millisecond, which was pretty impressive to see, so no notes here. In terms of step counting, there was pretty good alignment between the Garmin and the Amazfit devices. It was notable that the Helio Strap consistently had me doing less steps a day than the Garmin. The Garmin had an average over the 20 days of 9,381 steps, with the Amazfit at 8,136, which is about 13% less each day on average. So if you want to have an easier time hitting those 10,000 steps a day, go for a Garmin. The Helio Band will also estimate your VO2 max, but to do this, you have to manually start a running activity and maintain a speed of at least 10 minutes per kilometre for 10 minutes during that activity for it to give you a reading, which you can see in the workout section. So onto some of the other features. The Amazfit Band can be set up to auto-detect your activities. However, it can't currently auto-detect what type of activity you are doing, so everything just gets logged as an activity. I started out with the sensitivity set at medium, but I found it too sensitive, often just randomly logging an activity when I was doing pretty much nothing. I changed the sensitivity to low, and it has been better, detecting less random things, but it still triggers when I'm doing things like warm-up stretches, which I don't really want. The issue here is if you have your ZEP app account synced with Strava, it will push even the most obscure activities to Strava as workouts. The other quirk I didn't like was if you start an activity within the ZEP app, such as a run, it doesn't disable the auto detection, so in some cases it will register an activity twice. Once that you started manually, and then once that it auto detected, even if they occur at the same time. It will push both to Strava, in effect duplicating your activities. Which brings me on to the manual activity tracking. If you don't mind starting an activity from your phone in the ZEP app or on another Amazfit device, the Helio Strap acts as an excellent heart rate monitor for tracking your effort during an activity. There are 27 different sport modes available, and you can link your account with Apple Health, Strava, Relive, Training Peaks, Adidas Running and Komoot to push your activities to those platforms. The band itself doesn't have GPS, so for tracking a run, it'll have to either use your phone or an Amazfit watch with GPS to track your distance and your route. I have found the Helio Strap performs extremely well with regards to tracking heart rate when compared side by side with the Polar Verity Sense bicep-based heart rate monitor, which came out top in my testing last year. Worn on the wrist on a 5k consistently paced run, you can see the Helio Strap performs almost identically to the bicep-worn Polar Verity Sense. On Strava, you can see that they posted very similar relative effort scores, 48 for the Polar and 49 for the Amazfit. Where I was really surprised was in the swimming pool. The Amazfit is waterproof to 5 ATM, and when worn on the wrist with the Polar Verity Sense against my temple connected to the Form swim goggles, the Helio Strap tracked pretty much identically to the temple-based Polar. The relative effort scores on Strava for these activities were identical. In an Olympic weightlifting workout with the Polar worn on the bicep and the Helio Strap on the wrist, it was impressive to see how closely aligned the heart rate data was for this activity. This is quite a tough activity to track, with short periods of explosive power followed by decent periods of rest. Once again, the relative effort score here on Strava was identical for both devices. After making my first impressions video, I got a lot of questions about a bicep strap for the Helio Strap. While there isn't one officially available from Amazfit as of the making of this video, I fashioned an effective bicep strap using a spare £1.50 elastic watch strap I got from AliExpress. I'll link the video to that in the description and also at the end of the video. Using my makeshift bicep band, I did another Olympic weightlifting class. To be honest, for this type of activity, my preference is to keep my wrists free for wrist support. You can see that the Helio Strap performed well again. It had a few spikes of higher heart rate compared to the Polar in the final quarter of the activity, but when it came to the relative effort score registered in Strava, they were both identical once again. The final activity I tracked was another run, but this time using the makeshift bicep band. This 7K run had alternating paces every kilometre, so you'd expect to see a little bit more rise and fall than with the earlier mentioned consistently paced run. Generally, the alignment was pretty spot on. There was some slight variation just between the 1545 and the 1550 mark, with the Helio Strap showing a more sudden drop in heart rate, but I'd say that it was within an acceptable range overall. The Strava relative efforts for this was 77 for the Polar and 79 for the Helio Strap, so a minor difference, but I'd say within an acceptable range. I wouldn't say the Helio Strap performed any better on the bicep than the wrist because it seemed to do such a good job on the wrist, so at this stage I'd say wearing it on the bicep would be more down to a personal preference than a device performance gain. Another feature the Helio Band is supposed to have is to be able to connect it as an external heart rate monitor for a device such as a Garmin watch, but I found this function to be quite buggy. My Garmin would recognise the Helio Band, but it would almost instantly disconnect and then not reconnect, so I gave up trying this feature, but hopefully this might get fixed in a firmware update. A couple of other notable things that the band will do if you choose to turn it on in the Zepp app is detect high and low heart rate while at rest and send you an alert if it detects these, as well as being able to do similar for both blood oxygen levels and high stress levels. So after all that, what are my conclusions on the Amazfit Helio Strap? Well, that really depends on what you're looking for. If you are looking for a low-cost, no subscription alternative to a Whoop band, the Helio Strap might just be worth a look. Given how new it is, some of the features are perhaps not as refined as they appear on the Whoop, such as auto activity detection, but perhaps that is going to come in time. If you are not wedded to a particular ecosystem and you are looking to either reduce distractions or be able to wear a more traditional watch alongside something that will track your metrics, I think the Helio Strap could be an excellent choice for your needs. You can push most metrics recorded on the Helio Band into Apple Health, so if that is your ecosystem of choice, then the Helio Band might still be a good option for you. It is worth noting that it doesn't push HRV to Apple Health, but Apple doesn't really take that from anywhere really except an Apple Watch from what I can see. If you are looking for accurate heart rate tracking, I've been incredibly impressed with the Helio Band so far, both on the wrist and on the bicep. It's consistently aligned with my Polar Verity Sense, which I rate very highly. But for me, I've been in the Garmin Connect ecosystem for as long as I've been wearing smart devices, so for me, while the Helio Band is a compelling option, it's not enough for me on its own to switch over to the Zepp Health ecosystem. With Polar releasing a similar faceless device later this year, I'm hopeful Garmin might follow suit, as I do like the idea of not wearing a watch occasionally, or wearing a traditional watch while still being able to track my daily metrics. Hopefully, Amazfit will sort out the connection issue with the band connecting to devices such as my Garmin watch, because my Polar Verity Sense is over 4 years old now, so when the battery starts to become an issue, I'd really see a use for the Helio Strap as an activity heart rate monitor paired to my Garmin watch. Hopefully you found this review useful. Let me know if you do have any questions down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. See ya.